on Pluto yet once more. And today we're improvising with the New Horizons panorama. There are two versions. First of all, the Lorry version, Lorri, 103121, and also the Andrea Luck version, which was processed in 2000. However, we will usurp some of the techniques of exploration and come up with some very interesting views. And you can detect various structures and the various patterns as well, which does have implications for the type of planning involved in the design. And you'll notice that there are some, quote, craters that are very symmetrical and certain angles that have got to be planned architecture. And of course, you're welcome to come up with your imaginative ideas and whatnot. And we'll just start with that right now. And welcome to Effective Evolution. And we're visiting Pluto once more with the aid of New Horizons. And this is the Lorri, Lorri version 103121. And after getting a bit more acquainted with this area, you can come up with lots of areas to experiment with, and we're going to do that. And as soon as you start to zoom in a bit, there are many areas that are very inviting. Just without any activity at first, you can see that Pluto is very attractive. Nitrogen, ice, and all. And there are structures to explore. And with this clip that has a section of the northern part of Pluto compared to where we were last time, you come up with something like this. There are some very intricate designs in here. And of course, you can always surmise your own ideas. Closer to the surface, you definitely could make out some intricate designs. For example, right here, right here. Now, if you look very carefully, you can determine that there are some structures here that are very designed. They could be buildings, whole areas of established settlements or whatnot. Or you have to decide for your own as to the likelihood of this being designed with some very advanced planning or whatnot. And of course, these are just some of the areas that are a bit further north than where we were last time. And you can look at some structures in here as well. And using the dodge tool a bit, there is a bit more detail. and those structures are a bit more definitive, as you can take a gander at right here. Very interesting shapes. Now, is that made by nature? Or is it planned architecture? You must admit it's very interesting to speculate on. And some of the very interesting shapes may be denoted with these areas. You can see that there are very symmetrical designs, structures that have a linear pattern to them. What is this in the center of this perfectly circular crater, which looks like it has a wall around it, and all these structures inside here. Very designed and indicative of areas of subtle architecture. Very straight designs here. Intricate patterns and architecture. Simply amazing. Going in a bit closer here, you can see the very planned patterns of this structure. Very enticing to speculate on, for sure. They're very elaborate designs, worthy to be noticed, of course, and you can readily discern them after you get more familiar with them. And now we're going to head to the other side, which is in another shade, specifically this area right here. This area right here. And when you use the exposure tool, you can see some more detail. For example, these structures here that have been highlighted. Mind you, it is at a somewhat oblique angle, but you could definitely see some very designed patterns here. And you have to decide, are these craters, or are they in fact manufactured? This looks like some type of tower that's just rising up off of the surface. And these areas seem to be structures that have a linear pattern with a very lengthy type of settled area around it. And are these just craters, or what is inside this crater? Are these manufactured buildings, or is that made randomly by nature? The same on this side. There are some interesting track lines here and around. And after your eyes adjust to it, of course, you can arrive at some further thoughts about this. And with the next clip, in the same area, the underside, the darker shade, you could determine that with this clip that there are some very interesting structures in here. For example, you can see that there are some designed architectural pieces here that are rising off of the surface. Now, is that just nitrogen ice or whatnot? And here's a perfectly cylindrical object. This area seems to be symmetrical as well, but you have to decide for yourself, and these could all be structures in here in addition. These are very designed here as well. Mind you, it is in the shadow a bit, but you can see some very interesting patterns here. Now, does that occur naturally in nature? You'll have to come up with your own ideas, of course. And this is another area in that region, in the shady underside of Pluto. You can see some very intricate patterns here. Very orderly lines and designs all over the place, really. Now, is that made by nature randomly? Or is it planned building or whatnot? It is very notable. And use your magnifiers when you get a chance as well, because there's lots to discover here. Intricate detail right under the main prominent areas. In between here, you can determine that there are other elements of design. And before we were at this area of Pluto, and you probably would remember some of these structures. And this is the Andrea Luck version of Pluto, the New Horizons vehicle's camera being used in 2015. And we're going to explore up further, and we'll get to these areas here, which are quite fascinating. You could determine some structures already, more than likely. And these are just a few. There are many more, of course. And we'll start that as soon as possible right now. And you can see at first glance that there are some very intricate structures in here. After you adjust to the focus, you can see that there are interesting structures that have very creative and symmetrical designs to them. Just carrying on the theme that there is every indication of an advanced civilization here. Here as well, you can see the notable patterns and whatnot. Mind you, it will take a while before you get familiar with the scenery, but as usual, it doesn't take long. Before you know it, you can discern and come up with your own extrapolations. Are these designed by chance in nature, or are they pre-planned developments? It's all over the place, actually. Another interesting pattern here. And if we play around with the various instruments, such as the contrast tool and exposure tool, you come up with a lot of different ideas. And this is a more advanced version of the exposure mode. And you could definitely come up with some more detail here. You can still see some of the areas that are noted, as well as some areas that we've explored before and gone over as well. And keep on with your exploration, and hopefully you found this version of Pluto very interesting.